Hello and welcome to this live show. I'm Vicky. It's autumn and soon our clocks will be going back in preparation for winter. That's on Sunday the 26th of October. The clock's going back, not winter, just to be clear. For many parents out there, this can be a difficult time as their children wake up even earlier than usual. Today I'm joined by sleep expert Mandy Gurney, founder of Mill Pond's Children's Sleep Clinic, who'll be giving some well-needed tips and advice on this change in sleep pattern, bedtime routines, and even how their favourite TV show can help. Mandy, welcome. Lovely to have you with us today.
Thank you.
We are, of course, live, so if you have any questions out there for our guest, please use the box on your screen and we will do our best to tackle them over the course of the next 15 minutes or so. And if you're tweeting whilst watching the show, then please use the hashtag #NightGardenBedtime. That's NightGardenBedtime, and we'll try and give you a mention. Now, Mandy, I've got so many questions for you because
Perfect.
I'm a mummy of an 11-month-old, so you can imagine they're all there. But before we dig into the sleep issues, take a look at this.
Go to sleep, Makka Pakka.
Pakka. Makka Pakka.
Go to sleep, Upsy Daisy.
Daisy too.
Go to sleep, Pontipines. Go to sleep, Tombliboos. Go to sleep, Hahoos. Go to sleep, Ninky Nonk. And go to sleep, Pinky Ponk. Go to sleep, everybody. Wait a minute. Somebody's not in bed. Who's not in bed? Igglepiggle's not in bed. Don't worry, Igglepiggle. It's time to go.
Hi, Igglepiggle. Oh, he wasn't waving to me. I imagine there's lots of Igglepiggles out there. We're going to be talking about all those children that find it hard to sleep. Before we do get your tips and advice, can you tell us a little bit about this collaboration? So CBeebies in the Night Garden is working with you to what? Help get parents knowing more about children's routine at night time. How did this all come about? What is it about?
Well, the premise of In the Night Garden is a lovely, relaxing, winding down programme that parents like to watch with their children before they start their bedtime routine. And In the Night Garden recognise that this is a challenging time coming up with the clocks changing. So what we've done is we've joined forces to come up with a whole range of tips for parents so that they can manage this difficult time for their child and ease them into the clock change. So all those problems hopefully won't even happen.
I hope so. This is going to be my first experience of a clock change with a child of my own, so I'm going to be listening very well. Let's talk about the survey. There was a recent survey carried out for In the Night Garden on behalf of In the Night Garden. Now, I was quite surprised by these figures. Let's see what you think. A third of parents said that their children wake earlier when the clocks go back. A third, that's a huge amount. And a quarter say that actually their children's behaviour changes and is affected by the clocks going back. Does that surprise you at all?
No, not at all. We know from all the research that behaviour is one of the main things that can change with children who are not getting enough sleep. So if your child is overtired, what you'll find is they have a rise in the hormones cortisol and adrenaline, and both those hormones for children are the equivalent of being given shots of caffeine or sugar. So you can imagine if you've been given that, you're going to be very energetic, on the go, more likely to have accidents, more likely to be tearful, and to find it quite difficult to cope with things. So this is what parents are having to deal with. They may find their child hitting more, biting more, even kicking out because they're sleep deprived. And we know that a child who is overtired is actually more difficult to get to bed and get to sleep than a child that's not quite tired enough. And the parents that we talk to at Mill Pond, one of the first things that improves even after just 1 week of getting better sleep is their behaviour. So it's the first thing to change when they start sleeping a bit better. So first thing to go wrong, first thing to get better.
And do you think people necessarily recognise that change in behaviour as something related to their sleep? For example, when my little girl was very small, my husband found it hard to recognise when actually she was overtired, she was overstimulated, because those signs can sometimes look like they're really awake and wanting to have fun. So how difficult is it for parents to actually pinpoint that that's the issue, do you think?
It's very difficult, actually. I totally agree, because sometimes a child who is overtired, as I said, is very over-energetic. So some parents may think their child doesn't need as much sleep as the average child. But what we know is getting that child to sleep better, they will be calmer, so they can listen better, and it all helps with their learning and their memory and their general development. So just trying to recognise some of those tired signs. The first sign that a child is tired could be they just go quiet. So for parents, they need to look out for how long is it their child has been awake for, and are they just going quiet? Because that may be the first sign that they're actually tired. Waiting another hour or so, they could be overtired. So it's really important to think about those.
You go over the other side of the wall.
Tip over the edge, and then you've got the cortisol and adrenaline kicking in, giving that surge of energy, and you get the child who appears to be almost hyperactive or overactive.
I suppose, in a way, is it equivalent to when us adults get our second wind?
Totally, that's exactly what it is, a second wind. And you can create a second wind as part of the bedtime routine as well. So often mum will be at home with the child, all very nice and calm and quiet. Dad comes in from work, and then everybody gets really excited because daddy's home, haven't seen each other all day. And then, of course, it all just goes to pot, and the child won't go to sleep. So just the style of the way that the parent comes in the evening, it could be mum as well coming in at that time, the child gets very excited and then can't go to sleep.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mandy. We've got our first question from Samantha Nelson. Thanks, Samantha. Samantha says, my 19-month-old still won't sleep through the night despite being on 2 9-ounce bottles of milk at bedtime. That's quite a lot, isn't it? And water during the night and day. Have you got any suggestions?
Well, I think for Samantha, it does sound very much like her child has got a sucking to sleep association, which is the most common sleep association that young children have. And the problem is that if they learn to fall asleep feeding, then when they come into their light sleep, which we all do throughout the night, they need those same conditions put back in place again so they can get back to sleep again. So really she needs to think about how she teaches her son to fall asleep at bedtime. I think the other issue here as well is he's going to have a very full tummy of milk, because that actually is almost a full day's quota of milk at bedtime. So you can imagine all that milk is sitting in the tummy, needing to be digested, and so that child is going to find it hard to get to sleep, or they may wake only an hour later because they've got digestion issues, and that's always a giveaway. If a child wakes within an hour of having gone to sleep, they should be in their deep sleep, and it's very difficult to be woken from deep sleep, but pain will wake a young child. So feeding a child right before they get put to bed is not always going to work. It sometimes can have the opposite impact. So what we recommend parents do is have the milk, then have the little bedtime routine, and then settle to sleep without the milk. They can still have a cuddle, they can still have kisses and what have you, but gradually wean that away as well. So in small steps, they can learn how to fall asleep independently, and then do the same thing in the night too. So it's what happens at bedtime.
So it's not using sleeping aids. I suppose you don't.
That's right.
Do you not agree with? I mean, dummies and things like that. It's difficult, isn't it? If they've got used to it, but perhaps a little muzzy if he was just a suckle.
Absolutely. Anything that a child can manage for themselves is fine. So a little teddy, a cuddly soft toy, no problems at all, but the child needs to be able to do that themselves later in the night. So if they can find their dummy themselves, then it's not such a big issue, but it's giving them some kind of comfort, but not something that the parents have to go back and do again to get the child back to sleep.
I remember one of my friends left a sippy cup in the bed for her child around this age, so if they woke in the night and was getting used to being fed, he would just reach out for his sippy cup of water, take a couple of sips and go back to sleep.
I think the only thing I would worry about there is whether the child sort of took a big gulp and maybe choked, and the parents might not hear that. So I always think simplicity is best. So try and avoid those things in the first place. And the child might protest a little bit, but then eventually you will get rid of it and then it will be gone.
Yeah.
And if you can teach young children how to sleep well, they will take that right through their whole lives and be able to sleep well as adults, because research has shown there is a connection. So it's really setting them up for life is what you're doing.
So much responsibility when you put it like that. Whew. Great advice, such good advice. Samantha, I hope that helps. If you want to ask any more questions, of course, feel free to send them in. We have a question here from Hannah, and Hannah says, my 2-year-old daughter has set bedtime, but when the clocks change, she always refuses to sleep at those times and tries to stay awake. This means that she ends up being grumpy and tired. How can I get her into a sleep routine when the clocks change later this month?
Great question, because that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. So it's all about doing these things in small stages. So what I would suggest is taking her current bedtime, whatever time she actually falls asleep at, and slowly shifting that. So in 15-minute increments. So for the next 3 nights, put her to bed 15 minutes later, and then leave it at that point for 3 nights, and then another 3 nights later, another 15 minutes. So gradually moving her body clock so that she goes to sleep a whole hour later, and that will give the morning time to catch up as well, because it's very difficult for our body clocks to shift in the morning because we have very little sleep drive to help us to get back to sleep if we wake too early in the morning. So that's why it's so much better to do these things slowly so the child's body clock has time to catch up with the changes.
Okay. So that's why we're talking about it today, because how long do you think then it takes for us to change that? So a week
2 weeks. If parents can do this 2 weeks before the clock change, then their child won't be overtired at bedtime and they will start sleeping in a bit later in the morning, because what we don't want to do is the child to go to bed an hour later and still wake up at their normal time, because they will be losing out on an hour's sleep. And that can also perpetuate early rising issues. If a child's not getting enough sleep, they wake early often as well.
So I have a lot of friends and their babies seem to wake up at 5:30. It seems like this magical time in the morning for them to wake up. So if they thought for a second that means they would be being woken up at 4:30, I mean, that's like waking up in the middle of the night.
Yes, absolutely. And I had exactly the same with my son. You know, we used to watch TV early hours of the morning just for something to do. And that was before I started doing Mill Pond and was a sleep expert. So I now know better, so I can help other parents to avoid that. But I think one of the other things parents do need to be mindful of as well with the clock changes, not to give their child milk or something to eat too early in the morning, because what can happen is it becomes a learnt hunger issue. So their child could still wake up for their milk too early. So it's also shifting that first milk feed as well, whether it's a breastfeed, a bottle feed or breakfast. That needs to shift at the same time as the waking time too.
And I do remember when when I'd first had my daughter, it was very much that when you were starting to get into the routines, which we will talk about in more detail, starting to get into the routines, if they woke up at this time, that was still considered nighttime, and so you would treat that wake up as nighttime. Now she's slightly older, she's more wily, she knows that she can get mummy and daddy out of bed. At what point would I say, actually, this is too early, I'm going to leave you in your cot, or can you just not do that as they get older?
Yeah, it's a very good question actually. I think anything after 6 o'clock in the morning is almost acceptable.
Yeah.
I know it will be a bit dark as the winter comes on, but I think for most young children an 11-hour night is going to be the norm.
Yeah.
So if they're asleep by 7 o'clock in the evening, we would hope they can get through till 6 o'clock the next morning. So I often suggest to parents that their child should fall asleep around 7:30 in the evening. So if you're doing your 11-hour night, you at least get through to 6:30. But anything before 6, I would count as nighttime still and try and get your child back to sleep. And as I said earlier, because you have very little sleep drive at that time of the morning, it will take longer than any other sleep issue to resolve, but it's definitely worth it because you do not want a child waking up too early for years, because that can happen if you don't address it.
No, you really don't. You hope this is just a small little chapter, don't you?
Yeah, totally.
And then you have those lovely cosy lions till 11 in the morning, don't you?
Yes, especially when they're teenagers and you can't get them out of bed, so
I
you
look
go
forward
the other
to those
way.
days,
Yeah.
I really do. Let's talk a little bit more about In the Night Garden and the magazine. What exactly are they doing to help parents like me get our children into a routine?
Well, what they have come up with, which are really fantastic, is a set of activities that parents can do with their child as sort of to talk about bedtimes and talk about bedtime routines and to think of bedtime in a nice way. And they've also come up with a reward chart with lovely pictures so that
Great.
parents can keep on track with their child's bedtime routine. And both of those are available on the In the Night Garden website, and they will be coming up in the magazine as well, along with the tips they're going to talk about today.
So something visual that the child can see, they can see their rewards happening and...
Yes, and young children need visual images. So they don't need to see the wording, they can look at the pictures with mummy and daddy and put their stars on there so they know they've achieved, they've cleaned their teeth, they've got into their pyjamas, they've got into bed, and the stickers can go on to reward them for that.
That's a great idea. Love it. Rebecca Foster, how are you? Thank you for your question. Rebecca says, for my little boy being born till he was 1, he slept an hour a day, and now he won't go to sleep any earlier than midnight to 1 in the morning. Oh gosh, I've tried everything. Have you got any suggestions?
That's very hard.
That's hard.
Yeah, really
yeah, it's
hard.
really tough because actually the evening time is, even if it's only a few hours, it's your time just to sit and
You need it.
breathe.
Yeah, you need it. So I think with children of this age, he's got what we would probably term as a late sleep phase. So that means he's learnt to fall asleep very late. I don't know what time he's waking up eventually in the morning. So it's very important to think about what time does your child wake in the morning, because we all reset our body clocks from our waking time. So he may have shifted his sleep along into a different time zone to everybody else. So she does need to make sure that she starts waking him a little bit earlier in the morning and putting him to bed a little bit earlier, sort of together incrementally. So if she wakes him 15 minutes earlier in the morning, put him to bed 15 minutes earlier at bedtime, have a really quiet winding down bedtime routine. It only takes about half an hour so that he learns when she starts that process that sleep is coming, and he will enjoy it. It's special quiet time with mummy, but don't start getting him ready for bed until his current falling asleep time. So he wouldn't need to have his bedtime routine start until probably about midnight, with a view to him being asleep by 1 o'clock in the morning, and then gradually moving the whole lot en masse in small stages until the whole body clock has been brought back into what we would all think of as the sort of the norm for children to sleep, maybe 7:30 to 6:30.
It's sort of like a big version of what we're talking about the clocks going back, isn't it?
Yes,
It's
so
just
she's
like
got
a
the
bit
extreme
bigger.
version
Yes,
of it. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
I hope that helps, and I really hope that gets better for you. I mean, that must be tough. Right, another question from Kim York. Thank you very much. Kim starts with, help! My child will not stay in her own bed and I'm exhausted. What do I do? Lily will not stay in her own bed, the youngest. I put her back time and time again, but I'm so exhausted. Now the perseverance is not paying off. Yet what have I done that's so wrong? She has a routine in place. She eats well and she's healthy. She has her bath and bed routine, as well as the same as my other daughter. She gets a lot of fresh air. She has no nap. She refuses one, full stop. She never has slept all night, not even as a baby.
Oh dear, so this little one has got a long-standing sleep problem. So
and nothing like the sister. I think lots of people have their second child and think they'll be just like the first child, but actually they're individuals. They will be completely different.
And that's so important to recognise that, actually. And it could work the other way around as well. You could have a child doesn't sleep very well and then the second one comes along and they're great sleepers. So it's not what parents have done themselves necessarily. It can be down to child's personality. Often we find at Mill Pond that the more determined the child is, the more likely you are to have a sleep problem, because they will push against boundaries. And if you're tired yourself as a parent, sometimes it's really hard to just keep to those boundaries, even though you know you ought to. You just let them go, and as children sometimes will continue that pushing. So it is important to be very consistent and clear with the boundaries. I think what might have happened in this particular situation is the getting out of bed bit may be being perceived as a reward for waking by her daughter, because we can't resist but pick our toddlers up and carry them back to their bedroom, and of course it's going to be a lovely cuddly occasion that happens, and maybe talking to her as well at that point, saying, come on, you have to go back to bed, it's sleepy time. But that may be inadvertently rewarding the waking. So take her back.
It's hard.
Yeah,
isn't
I
it?
know it is hard, but it will work. If she takes her back, don't carry her. Just guide her back. Don't say anything other than quick, back to bed. But the real key is what happens at bedtime. Make sure that that bedtime routine is very quiet and winding down, because if you've got two children getting ready for bed together, it might have become a bit of a playtime, and they may be in the bath for 20 minutes or more, splashing around, having lots of fun, and then being out of the bath, running around, parents are trying to catch them to get them ready for bed. And of course it all becomes great fun. And then you put the child into bed and surprise, surprise, they can't go to sleep because they've just had a party. So it's really important to have this quiet winding down routine, as I've already said, and then get your child into bed, little story, very quiet and calm, and then say goodnight to them. And it may be temporarily, mum will have to sit with her till she falls asleep, but gradually move herself a little bit further away in small stages till she's out of the room, so that her daughter falls asleep without her there, just keeping it all nice and calm and peaceful.
Excellent. I mean, it's all habit building. If she's in the habit of getting into the bed, Kim, you can turn it around and get her into the habit of going into her own bed again. But we've all been there. Don't think that you're bad. You're a lovely, brilliant mum. We've all been there. Let's have this one then from Natalie Weston. Thanks, Natalie. She says, my 2-year-old refuses to sleep alone and is such a light sleeper. He wakes constantly through the night. I can't cough or leave the room for waking him. This has been as a result of moving home. Any suggestions to help him and to get him into a deeper sleeping pattern? Does that mean they're literally not going into a deep sleep?
Well, I think it sounds as if he's on guard because he knows that mummy's going to leave. So he's not allowing himself to relax into that sleep. So the tiniest little noise, he's just going to go, oh, what's that? It's a little bit like when you have your baby. You might have been a brilliant sleeper before you have your baby, and then you're on guard. So the tiniest little creak or sound, you hear it. And the same thing for children. If they are on guard, waiting for a parent to leave, then they won't go properly into that nice deeper level of sleep. So that's part of the reason here.
They are clever little things.
Well, they're like us, really.
They're just mini versions of us.
They are, and it does create a bit of anxiety for him as well. So I'm sure that knowing that mummy's going to leave is all part of the anxiety. And probably going into a new house might have been a bit anxiety provoking for him too, new surroundings. He just needs a bit of time to adjust, and maybe just don't try and leave too quickly. Wait for him to be fully asleep at least 10 minutes before you leave the room, because it takes about 10 minutes to get into deep sleep. So always time it an extra 10 minutes before you attempt to get up and go. So that he knows, that he's deeply asleep before you go, and then he may not be on guard. But I would really, again, like with the other cases, is start right back at the basics, quiet winding down bedtime routine, sit with him until he's deeply gone to sleep, and then get up. If he cries out in the night, immediately go back, repeat what you did at bedtime. But then after 3 or 4 nights, just move a little bit further away, same process, and then another 3 or 4 nights, move a little bit further away again. So gradually, in small stages, he gets used to being away from mummy to go to sleep, rather than just trying to quickly leave. It's obviously making him feel anxious.
Gosh, you're making me think. I heard a story the other day about a gentleman who gets into the cot with his baby to soothe her to sleep. So, I mean, that's going to be even trickier. How's he going to get out of the cot without them waking up the baby? The things we do as parents, the stories we could tell. Final question then from Sam Clark. Thank you, Sam. Sam says, my 2-year-old boy will not go to sleep in his bed. I read to him, which makes him fall asleep, but he will be up within the hour wanting to come into our bed. He then refuses to go back to his bed. This has all happened since since we've moved. I thought, am I reading the same one? No, they've moved as well. He also has a 4-month-old sister, so that could be unsettling.
Okay, yes.
Is there something we can do to make him want to go and stay in his bed?
Well, we go back to the same thing again. Bedtime is the key to this, because he's obviously dependent on mummy being there for him to fall asleep. So he falls asleep while she's reading to him, which is not an uncommon problem at all. So he does need to know that he's fallen asleep without mummy in the bedroom. We know that one of the reasons we come into light sleep is to check our environment to make sure it was the same as it was when we fell asleep at bedtime. It's nature's way of protecting us and keeping us safe, because if something has changed from how things were at bedtime, we would be alerted to that and do something about it. We don't need it so much now because we live in a safe world, most of us, but we haven't evolved away from doing that. So it's a learnt behaviour and a safety mechanism, and that's why he's getting up in the night. So if she can teach him how to fall asleep without being read to at bedtime, he will have a chance of being able to go back to sleep without needing that to happen later on in the night, because he's just having the replication. I think the little sister coming along has probably knocked him a little bit as well, so he wants mummy there a bit more. He's now got a challenge. Mummy was his sort of world before, and suddenly there's somebody else now.
Do you see that a lot at the clinic? Yes,
a lot. And it can again create anxiety, and children quickly learn that it may be bedtime or in the night that they get that extra attention, even though the parents are given all the attention in the day, but they want that little bit of extra reassurance because it has knocked their world a little bit, really. So it's not surprising.
Okay, thank you. I hope that helps. I'm sure it has. And we're almost out of time, so let's just get back on track. We're talking about the clocks going back and how you're going to save people like me. We don't have to get up an hour earlier because we have the help you're working with in the Night Garden magazine. You've got those wonderful reward charts, which I think are great. Very important as well for it to be a message across the board, because in modern society, it's the parents who look after the child, and then the grandparents quite often look after the child as well. So we all need to be on message with each other, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. Everybody who deals with a child has to do the same thing. And children love consistency and they thrive on routines. It makes them feel safe. They love that sort of familiarity of the different steps that you go through. It might be incredibly boring for us, and then bedtime comes, you think, oh no, I've got to go through that bedtime routine again, and it's so boring, but they love it. And it's definitely worth investing just half an hour of your time into getting your child to go to sleep, because it's the best thing you could do for them, for every element of their health, physically and emotionally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you keep that message at your forefront, you'll probably find some enjoyment in doing the routine, I hope.
Yeah.
So for people watching now, perhaps they've only just tuned in, a top tip then for us getting our children used to the clocks going back in 2 weeks' time.
Okay, so start now by putting your child to bed 15 minutes later than they currently fall asleep. After 3 or 4 nights, move it again by another 15 minutes, 3 or 4 nights again. And so gradually you move your child's body clock on a whole hour, so that when the clocks finally change in 2 weeks' time, their body clock will have moved on an hour, and hopefully you won't have those early rising issues because the morning body clock will have had time to adjust at the same time. And that's the thing, we don't want to have problems at bedtime because the child is overtired, and we don't have problems in the morning because they're getting up too early. So we need to think about both ends of the night, and this is how you can do it. Preparation.
Great, thank you so much. I can't tell you how interesting this has been. Thank you for your wonderful questions as well. I really hope that's helped you out. I'm sure it has. They're tricksy, these babies, you know, they're tricksy. We are out of time though. My thanks to sleep expert Mandy Gurney for joining us. And if you want to find out more about how In the Night Garden can help your child develop healthy sleeping patterns and avoid waking up an hour earlier when the clocks go back, visit inthenightgarden.co.uk. And don't forget to download their new free web app as well. See you again.